Hi, I'm Jim W6LG, your YouTube Elmer here in Rockland, California. This morning I'm going to be interviewing Tim Duffy of DX Engineering at his contest station, K3LR. The station is designed to provide emergency communications around the world. So here we go, an unscripted interview with Tim Duffy, K3LR. So K3LR, good morning from W6LG.
Good morning.
Nice to talk to you. I I heard that you were licensed at a fairly early age. How old were you, Tim?
12.
And whereabouts in the country were you?
So I grew up in Sharon, Pennsylvania, which is about 65 miles northwest of Pittsburgh.
To take the test, where did you have to go?
So, of course, the novice test was on the dining room table, but general test was in Pittsburgh, and then advanced and extra and first class commercial all in Buffalo, New York.
Well, now I was 14 for the novice and 15 for the general downtown LA. And even at that age, I found it really intimidating. But for a 12-year-old, it was
Sure.
probably even harder. Because tell me a little bit about when you took the general class exam. What was the setting? In my case, it was an old decrepit building in downtown LA.
Yeah, the setting was a federal building in downtown Pittsburgh, and so I was 13 at the time, and there's a really cool backstory to what happened that day. And so I was quite good at CW, so the 13 words a minute wasn't a problem. And in between the code test and the theory test, there was a little bit of a break, and so I started talking to the kid next to me, and I said, the November sweepstakes CW is this weekend. Are you going to be on for that? And he had just recently moved to the area from Texas, and his dad was in the oil business, and so they had just relocated to Pittsburgh. And he said, yeah, he would be on. And as it turns out, that kid turned out to be Randy Thompson, K5ZD, one of my closest contest friends for the last 50 years. And so it was just through luck and fate or whatever. So that was the highlight of the general test.
You know, I that brings up an interesting sub point, and that is that amateur radio has some things that are unique that nothing else has. And one of the things that is different is that you can make friends 50 years ago and still have that person as a friend. And Stan Seachev, R7KZ, he and I met on the air in the mid 60s, and we've been friends ever since. Um, when I took when I took the general test, sat in a room, and they had these desks that were on like wood rails. And so the desk in front of you was attached to the guy's seat. And so if he moved, your desk was moving. And you took the CW first, receiving, and then sending, and then the written test. And there were about 60 that took, I had to take it twice, I failed it the first time. There were about 60 that would take the test, and bunches would fail the receiving part of it. And then actually the sending part, some guys failed that too, which would seem to be pretty easy, but it wasn't. And then came with the written test. And you may remember you had to wait 30 days to retest if you did fail, and we only had 1 year to upgrade and all that stuff. But I'm sure glad I did. It's been a lot of fun. So right out of the gate, you were interested in contesting it because you were asking the guy behind you, your now really lifelong friend, about an upcoming novice roundup.
Yeah, actually it was the ARL sweepstakes CW,
Oh, okay.
and then because there was delays in getting me my general license because you couldn't operate with general privileges until you got the license in the mail in those days.
Right.
There was a big delay, and so I did get to operate the novice roundup in that February. So I passed the test in November, but did not get my general license until March. but yeah, I mean, the first field day in 1972, just after I got my novice test, I was fortunate enough to get hooked up with a pretty competitive field day team, and that's where I saw contesting, and I fell in love with it right there.
I want to ask you some questions about station assembly. You have a situation where you've got a lot of operators in one room, but before we get there, and all the complexity that goes with that. So, while I have maybe two active transceivers, you might have 20 or 40 in a room, and you might have all kinds of antennas outside, and one might interfere with the other, and how you resolve those things. But before we get there, I ordered from DX Engineering a transceiver. A kind lady called late in the evening. It must have been 8 or 9 o'clock to confirm the address and just to make sure I hadn't entered it wrong. And she was very nice. And the next day, the box was here. And then there was another transceiver that I wanted, and it came into stock. And I thought, I'm going to go ahead and order, because if I wait, it might not be there in another day or two. So I ordered yet a second transceiver. And again, it arrived the next day. I was talking to a buddy in South Africa, Sean Billy Williams, ZS1SBW. He only buys from DX Engineering. And one of the primary reasons is he gets it in like 5 days. How do you guys do that? How does that happen that you can get it out so quickly?
Well, we are part of Summit Racing Equipment, which is the world's largest aftermarket car parts store. And so we are able to take advantage of their shipping capabilities. And so we ride along with that. In the case of your two transceivers, they were shipped out of Sparks, Nevada, which is one of our warehouse locations. And you can always go into Sparks too and pick up your order. That's a Summit Racing location. And so when we're shipping out of Sparks to California, we are able to get ground shipping, which in this case with a transceiver is more than $100, so it was free.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So we're able to get ground shipping into most of California the next day. So, it leaves our warehouse before midnight. It gets to the UPS or FedEx terminal around 12:30 a.m. and off they go. It just, that's how it works.
So that begs the question, how, this marriage between Summit Racing and DX Engineering, when did that start? What was the genesis of that idea? Who thought it up, and who got it going? Was that you?
Well, no, it wasn't me. Summit Racing is about 53 or 54 years old, so it's been around a lot longer. DX Engineering's been around 22 years, and I've been with the company now 9 years. So the owner has two hobbies, fast cars and radio.
Oh, really? So he's
we're-
a ham. The guy
Yes.
that owns DX Summit is a ham radio operator. Oh, how
Yep.
neat. Yeah. That's interesting. So, since you've been there, have you made some changes in the structure of the company, or you mentioned the warehouse in Sparks. When I placed the order, I wasn't aware that it could ship out of Sparks. I figured, 3 or 4 days. So when the box was at the front door, I was shocked. How many places do you have in the U.S. that have boxes of transceivers or other stuff?
Yeah, so we have two warehouses, two places we ship from. Our home office in Talmadge, Ohio, which is very close to Akron, and then Sparks.
Okay.
So we have two places, and that gives us pretty good coverage for the U.S.
It's remarkable. And my friend in South Africa, how does it happen that he can get it in 5 days? What's the method that you typically ship to get it to an
Well,
overseas customer?
Yeah, that can go a number of different ways. It can go DHL, it can go FedEx, it can go UPS. Our shipping team is very knowledgeable about what's going to be the fastest shipping time to a customer's location. So that enters into the equation when they pick the shipping company. And we have a lot of good track records from previous shipments to almost every country in the world. And so we know what's going to work.
Okay. Also, I want to make a comment. I was in retail for a lot of years with what was a very large retailer, and now it's just about I think it may even be out of business. Um, Customer service is a big deal with me, and I sent an email to you to thank the lady that helped me on the purchase because she was great. So, and I'm not the only person that's had that experience. I've talked to several guys in preparation for today, and I always get the same feedback. It's all really good. Um, Tell me about the crew that you have there in Ohio.
Well, the crew is actually not all in Ohio. We have employees in Nevada that are on the phone, employees that are in Texas, and employees that are all over the state of Ohio. Since the pandemic and working remote,
Hmm.
Scott Jones, our sales manager, N3RA, really took the opportunity to juice the operation so that we could hire people outside of Ohio. And so we're able to hire in 4 different states. We're able to hire in Georgia, Ohio, Texas, and Nevada. And and we're very careful about who we hire. The culture is extremely important. I did Scott and I actually worked together at Cellular One and AT&T. We were very customer focused there, and so we have brought that with us. And Summit Racing is a very customer focused operation as well. So the cultures are much the same, and I'm very, very proud. The team that we have has over 600 years of experience, Jim, as amateur radio operators.
Holy mackerel, that's more than me. That's great, and it much appreciated. I wanted to ask you a couple questions because in setting up a new transceiver, I had two K3Ss prior, and I've sold off one, and so I'm setting up new transceivers, and it's like starting over again. Some people would say, "Well, you've got all the equipment." Yeah, but that's 58 years worth of stuff that I've put together. I found though that some issues raised become a problem. For me, I was having a buzz, a ground, a hum, 60 hertz, 120 hertz. And it was a silly mistake in that I did not, I have 1 inch, inch and a quarter wide ground strap to each transceiver and then 4 inches out to the grounding system of copper strap. I forgot to connect it. So that brings up the issue that there are so many little pitfalls with putting up a new station. I wanted to ask you what you do at your contest station, which is an RF-rich environment. How do you handle all of those boxes? What kind of grounding system do you have, or earthing, maybe better described?
Well, the earthing is more about lightning protection, and the bonding is really what's important for keeping buzz and hum and all the strange things that can happen in a shack. But one of the things that I've embraced, and I give talks on this a lot, is this grounding and bonding for the radio amateur by Ward Silver. This book, it's a small book. It's not, it's an easy read, but this explains in big time detail exactly how to bond and ground your station. And if you follow the principles in this book, and there's also online resources, K9YC and W8JI all have free online resources as well. But everything in here is bonded perfectly.
Yeah, you said you underlined perfectly. That is really hard to do because if you don't do it perfectly, one box can be a couple of
Mhm.
volts higher than the box next to it. If you daisy chain them, which is not a good idea, that can happen. So how did you get that to be absolutely perfect? And how many stations do you have in the room?
So there are 11 stations, 11 amplifiers, 11 computers tied to those radios, um, 11 different antenna systems comprising of over 50 different antennas. And but the way I know that it's perfect is because I did it myself, and it took a long time.
I'll bet.
It took a long time, but I took the opportunity. I actually raised the tables 2 inches here last year because some of the operators here were getting taller and taller. So I had a request. They said, "Can you get the table up?" Well, that meant I had to tear all the stations down. to
Oh,
move that table up. And so I took the opportunity to put in new bonding and new grounding, and everything is working great.
did you, now there are some things that DX Engineering has that are unique to DX Engineering for grounding. One that I saw was some kind of a plate or something that the transceiver would sit on.
Yes,
Tell me about that, and where did that come from? Who thought that up, and do you use that device?
I do. I've got a copper ground plane under each radio and under each amplifier, and that helps to minimize the voltage differential along the way. And I first saw that in use. Dave Leeson, W6NL,
Hmm.
who was a Stanford professor, showed us how to do that when we were in Brazil in 2006 for the WRTC. And we actually used aluminum foil because we didn't have a sheet of copper. But anyway, it worked very well. And what it does is it keeps the voltage differential from occurring between all of the equipment. And it can actually be a big benefit when you're on the second floor.
Yeah,
And
that's an
it,
excellent point because that comes
yeah,
up all the time. The guy will say, "Well, I'm over the garage or I'm on the second floor. I have no way to bond or ground or earth my equipment."
right. And so it is explained in detail in Ward's book as well.
And zero AX. And
Yes,
and if Ward says it's blue, it's going to be blue.
that's right.
That he's also really good. Well, he's a good operator,
Yes,
contester, but and his presentation of information is generally straightforward, easily understood. So, and I have read a lot of, including parts of that book that he's written, and Tom Roush too. But Tom's writing is a little more difficult to comprehend. Ward's is really pretty straightforward, and it makes sense when you get through to when you get to the end of the paragraph or the chapter. You go, oh yeah, that adds up. What else have you done? Because you've got 11, you said 11 positions. You got 11 guys talking, maybe if it's a phone contest. Um, how do you handle, what are you using for microphones, and how do you handle just the acoustics of one guy being next to the other? What are they doing? Obviously they're not using hand mics, I guess, right?
no, 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 no. We are using the Bose QC15 noise canceling headsets. That's an active noise canceling headset. And when you have the Bose on your ears, you can't hear the guy next to you
Okay.
that's 2 feet away.
So it has a little microphone. It hears the guy next to you and cancels
Yep,
his waveform. So all
yep,
you're hearing is what's coming out. Oh, that's a
yep.
neat idea. Is that something that you have at DX Engineering or
No, we do not sell Bose headphones at DX Engineering, but Bose has had that technology and patented for years. And so the QC15 works very well. At some point, we might upgrade to the latest version of that.
Mhm.
But then we've adapted the Heil HC5 microphone to those headsets.
one of the best cartridges ever?
Yeah, and I have a lifetime supply of them. So I really like the way they sound. They work very well with the ICOM
I
radios.
have a box with a few in it too that I've saved over the years because it works. That cartridge will work no matter what.
Yep.
Hook it up to your transceiver. Make sure you got a good grounded cable, shielded cable. The other thing I was going to ask you about was power supplies and wall warts and that kind of thing because at my old location I was on top of a mountain, a lot of acreage and towers, and now I've moved to the city, and if I took a stick I could hit the house next door. So I was when I was a kid, you and I remember you were concerned about, and I was concerned about interfering with your neighbor's TV set. Now it's the other way around. It's your neighbor's TV set that's interfering with your amateur radio equipment. So I haven't talked to any of my neighbors, but there is a bunch of noise. So what do you do at your station because that's a problem for a lot of guys. How do you handle the noise generated by your neighbors and other sources?
Yeah, there are no wall warts here in the house, period. I mean, if a wall wart walks in the door, it is replaced with a linear power supply.
Okay. By linear,
To
you,
and,
by linear, you mean a power supply with a transformer in it
yes,
that
to and
doesn't switch.
including iPhone chargers. So when the contest operators show up with all their iPhones, I confiscate the wall warts, and then
Do you really?
at all,
Do you really
yes,
do that?
yeah, I do. And then at all the beds, there are chargers that are linear power supplies.
Okay, so a switching supply has transistors in it, and it switches back and forth. That
Actually has diodes, yeah.
is a diodes, okay, and that diode switching generates an RF signal, an AC at some point, right?
Yes, and it uses the power line as the antenna.
Yeah. And so there you go. Now, what about your neighbors? Have you ever knocked on your neighbor's front door? And because when I looked at the aerial photograph, you've got this large parcel, rectangular, but there's houses all around you across the street.
Yeah, I have in several occasions, and I think I've actually been quite good about doing that. I had a neighbor that there was something coming from his tool shed, and so I went over and I said, Wayne, I said, we're hearing something. He went inside. It was a charger for his battery powered drill, and it was red hot, Jim. It was red hot,
You're
and
kidding.
it could have produced a fire issue.
It was thermally red hot, not just
Yes.
generating RF, but it was ready to burn the house down.
That's right. And so he was very appreciative of that. I had another neighbor that there was noise coming, and it turned out to be their computer power supply was going bad. Again, it was red hot. So that was another fire averted. And then I've had neighbors recently that have decided to put up Chinese LED lights.
Oh, yeah.
And so in both cases, they were very nice to work with, and I was able to put filtering in there, and they're dead quiet now. So, you pick a battle one at a time, and I've been here for 35 years, and I've been a good neighbor, and I like to think that I get along with all the neighbors, and and neighbor relations is right up there, right? I do a lot of things that they're allowed to burn stuff on my property. They have a compost pile on my property. They have, so we all have free reign. It
Good.
works.
Um, in a lot of the guys who subscribe to my channel are new to amateur radio. Some are setting up a transceiver station for the first time. One of the things I harp on is the most important part of your station is the antenna system. That includes the antenna, feed line, switches, coax connectors, that kind of thing. Would you agree with that? And do you have any advice that's part one. And part, so it's, what do you think the most important part of the station is? And two, do you have any advice to someone who's buying their first transceiver? What kind of guidance would you give the guy who's wants to get on HF but is confused about what to buy?
Yeah, we do that a lot, Jim. We get a lot of guys that just got their license and they call in and say, what should I do? The antenna by far is the most important thing, and getting an efficient antenna. And I realize that there's space constraints and all sorts of issues, but we have a lot of solutions in the toolkit for antennas, and we can help you out there. We do have guys that will have a very poor antenna, but they decide they want an amplifier and a $6,000 radio, and they they're frustrated when they invest all that money, but they spend $1.98 on the antenna.
Yeah.
And so an antenna is the best bang for the buck. Then the other thing, I had an email the other day from a guy who had the top of the line Yaesu transceiver. It was the FTDX 9000. He says, I spent $10,000 on this. He says, I don't have a clue how to operate it.
I'll bet not.
And that's a case of you bought too much.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Jim, my advice is, you start with something basic. The FTDX10 from Yaesu is a great basic starter radio.
An amazing transceiver for the money. Absolutely amazing.
The IC7300 is great. Alinco has a whole line of entry-level radios. So we're not talking about a lot of money here. And actually, the performance of like the IC7300 and the FTDX10 is incredible for the amount of money you spend.
According to Rob It sure is. And you don't have to follow his ranking, but if you look at his data and just sort of, and that's part of the video I'm doing, is Dr. Frank Howell has created a sortable spreadsheet so you can sort the columns the way that you want to do it. And to look at what you and I had in the 60s and 70s, the stuff today is the 7300, which is got to be the most popular transceiver ever. ICOM's done Ray Novak and ICOM, they've done a wonderful job with that transceiver. It seems like I hear a lot of guys using, or I talk to a lot of guys using the 7300 and a hex beam, and what a great combination. You
Yeah,
can literally work the world with it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So a Linko, though, I hadn't thought about. What's an entry level Alinco? I'm not familiar with them at all, actually.
Yeah, one of these times, just go to the DX Engineering page and type in Alinco, and you'll see several radios that are underneath $1,000 that are very, they're not SDRs and things like that, but they're very simple and straightforward, and you can make lots of QSOs with them.
Yeah, and I think that that's what you need to do when you first get on the air, is make contacts, have fun. You may not understand a lot of things, but you'll learn as you go along. And guys like Ward Silver and Tom Roush and others who have books and other information online that breaks it down into simple things. Tim, I want to thank you for your time. The advantage of talking to somebody like you that has the contest station is that you've got 11 operators, 11 guys in a room, 11 amplifiers, 11 8877s or whatever's behind you in those two boxes. I know the one on the left on my screen. That's the one amplifier I would love. I've always wanted one of those. I think it's an absolutely gorgeous device. So the advantage in talking to you is it's not just a single station. It's complicated by times several hundred just because of the compounding of all this stuff. And you've been able to do that and do it well, as I can tell by the awards on the wall behind you. So I hope at some point we can do this again. Also, you have some devices, last thought, you have some devices, a friend of mine that in South Africa has the NCC2, and he demonstrated it in a Skype meeting with me. And can you talk about that device? Because for guys in noisy locations, what does it do? And my comment would be, what it does is amazing. So, Tim, what is that box and how does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jim. That is our flagship product. We're very proud of it. We did originally have an NCC1, and now we have the NCC2, which has a lot more features and functionality to it. But the NCC stands for Noise Canceling Controller, and the box can do two things. One, which is how I've always used the NCC over on 160 meters, is that I can combine two different receive antenna systems together to get one super receive antenna system. It allows actually to form the beam tighter and to reject noise. The other use, which is very popular, and there's some really good videos on our website from customers showing, turn it on, turn it off. And what happens where there's an A channel, Jim, and a B channel, and the A channel would be your normal receive antenna, and then the B channel turns out to be the noise antenna. So what you want to do on the B channel, that antenna needs to be aimed at your noise source. And it might be your neighbor, it might be a power line deal or whatever. We can take noise in that fashion. The noise canceling controller can take noise that's well over S9 down to S0. And it's the same principle as those Bose headphones.
Except it's not audio, it's RF, maybe would be the difference. And
That's it.
So what it does is you have this box and you hook up your main antenna and your transceiver to it, and then there's a third connection which goes to the antenna that you want to have receive that noise. So it needs to have that noise fairly strong on that extra antenna. And then it electronically takes that noise and inverts it. And when you turn on the box, you have these adjustments. So you got to work the knobs. But what I saw demonstrated, it just totally wiped out the noise.
Right.
And so you can do that. You can increase the RF gain, which for me is another thing that I harp on a lot is use the RF gain. You can turn that up, and all of a sudden, what was a bunch of noise and a bunch of interference is gone. It's not FM stereo, but it's pretty darn good. Yeah,
It's a lot better than what you had, and
yeah,
it's a a noise blanker on steroids. It is really good.
yeah. It really works. Hey Tim, thanks a lot. Appreciate your time, and I know you got a busy day, but um, again, to be able to talk to you about your station and what you did, everybody, as I'm finding with my new equipment. Okay, I've been on the air 58 years. I should know how to set the mic gain and the equalizer, but it's not just that easy. It takes some work. So
Yeah.
your point about look at Alinco, the 7300, the FTDX 10. The 10 is amazing. I mean, beautiful. Maybe that is a better choice than the 9000 or whatever, or the
Yeah.
icon. The icon. What is it? 7851. What the?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what's here.
yeah. That takes a lot of skill to address that. And if you're even a guy like me with almost 60 years, it is a challenge. Yeah.
Yep. Well, Jim, thanks so much for having me on today. And it's a real honor to talk to you and your viewers. And to those of your viewers that are DX Engineering customers, thanks so much for your business and your trust. I can tell you that we work very hard to earn that trust. And to those of you who have not tried DX Engineering, give us a shot. I think Jim and some of his friends have had really good luck with us, and we're ready to help you have fun with the greatest hobby in the world.
Yeah, it is. And I'll put links to all of that, including the NCC too. All right. Thanks a lot, Tim. I appreciate it.
All righty,
All right.
73, Jim.
All right. Thank you, sir. Bye bye.